you grow up with a NES, PlayStation, Star Wars, cartoons, and 80s TV? Do you like to think who would win in a fight between Batman and the Master Chief? Comics, games, movies, music, and TV. They're gonna tell you everything you need. Superheroes or not, they got your back. They're gonna save the world of geeks. Comics, games, movies, music, and TV. They're gonna tell you everything you need. Superheroes or not, they got your back. They're gonna save the world of geeks. ThisWeekInGeek. ThisWeekInGeek.
Hey guys, what's going on? And welcome out to ThisWeekInGeek.net's Loose Cannon. I am one of your hosts this evening, this morning, or whenever the hell you choose to listen to this. I am Mike the Birdman Dodd, and I'm not alone as I trek through the litany of B movies, C movies, D movies, and even some lesser known A movies we are going to be talking about on this particular film podcast we are launching this summer on This Week in Geek as part of our new website launch or soft launch. We don't know whether this will be up by the time things launch, but either way, you're going to listen to it because God demands it. And I am not alone as I sit in the theater seats, which are physically distanced for your safety. I'm joined with
Alex the producer, Alex the watcher. What should I call myself? Maybe Alex the movie geek. Remember Beat the Geeks? That's basically what we're doing right now.
Yeah, pretty much.
We're diving deep into movies that people either may have heard of, maybe forgotten, or are notorious for their status.
Yeah, like the idea of this particular podcast, as we record this on Canada Day 2020,
yes,
is
you may hear fireworks, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's actually fireworks happening right outside my apartment right now.
Same here.
So they say physical distancing. Well, some listen. But anyway, so yes, we are here to celebrate some of the movies that have maybe passed you by, stuff you may have heard in passing from other film critics, blogs, Twitter, etc. Because everybody, I think it's not unfair to say, if you're a geek from the 80s and 90s, you have heard of some of these movies. Some of them you may have not. We're also going to talk about some more recent entries and also talk about some of the more infamous movies. Some of these movies get made fun of because of ridiculous ideas or ridiculous concepts as a podcast. But the idea is to not tear these movies down. Yes, undoubtedly, there's going to be some terrible, stupid shit we are going to talk about, but we're also going to celebrate some of these movies because one of the things we want to do, because 2020 is essentially the dumpster fire that keeps on giving, we want to celebrate some of these things. And some of these movies we think are worth your time to at least watch once with your friends, by yourself, either way, while enjoying a frosty beverage and having yourself a pleasant evening. So this would be sort of the pilot episode for Loose Cannon, which we are naming after my roommate doing obscene gestures, which we are naming after the Cannon Film Group. The first one we're actually going to talk about is not a Cannon film. We're actually going to be talking about...
Hence the loose. It's loosely based on Cannon.
Yeah. Like, that was the original concept for this, but then me and Alex sort of started retooling it, and as things moved on...
Well, there were some movies that you thought and I thought were Cannon films, but they weren't.
Yeah.
They were just released at the same time to capitalize on the same things.
Yeah, like, we really wanted to celebrate sort of weirdness in movies, but also just have some fun with
celebrate when people could make theatrical movies that went to theaters, even if they were inept, and when they meant to make them good, but they just turned out not good. See, nowadays you see too many films that are made to try to recapture that feeling, when it's like, no, being tongue-in-cheek isn't as fun as when somebody's like, I've made my masterpiece, and then it turns out it's like Ed Wood crap.
Yeah. Which why is in our first inaugural episode, this pilot that you're currently listening to, we're actually going to focus on a more recent studio that came up in the early 2000s, which has had an interesting history, which has made movies for the Sci-Fi Channel, has made Christian movies. Some of these movies you've undoubtedly seen in the former shell that is known as Blockbuster, but you may have seen them pop up on the Sci-Fi Channel. You may see them in movie bargain basements everywhere.
Yeah, they're perpetually in the Walmart $3 bin for a lot of them.
Yeah, and it's not to say some of these movies don't have star power, because some of them do, but some of these actors and actresses just want to do them because they're fun little projects.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to buy an addition for their house or something.
90% of them, they were stars. Back in the 70s, you had The Love Boat and you had Fantasy Island, where you'd have wash-ups show up. And in the early 2000s to early 2010s, you had The Asylum.
Yeah, and The Asylum, it gets a lot of crap, but over the last couple of months or so, because we originally, a little bit of behind the scenes info, I had contacted David Michael Latt. He's one of the people over at The Asylum. He's one of the co-founders, I believe, and he contacted me years ago about doing something, but I just recently just saw something on Twitter, and we just started kind of following each other again, and that started a conversation which began back in May about, well, I'm doing all these interviews, we're all inside doing COVID, Hollywood's essentially shut down, let's have a conversation. And he says, well, what the fuck else am I going to do? And through an unfortunate series
I
of
believe
errors,
in those words exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
when you showed me the correspondence, I'm like, oh, so he's down to do something? And you showed me, and it says, well, what the fuck else am I going to do? Let's do this.
Yeah, and he was just a totally agreeable fellow. And
very down to earth.
And just through a series of comedies of errors, we couldn't get the technical side of things to work, because we were originally going to have him on the show. We were originally going to record through Discord, and that just didn't work on his end for whatever reason. We were going to try a different technical solution, but because they're not going into their offices with the whole kind of lockdown, we're not going to make a guy leave his house to just do an interview. That's not safe for him. It's not safe for anybody involved.
It became an apples and oranges equipment situation where things weren't going to line up.
Yeah, so we did do some correspondence via email, and he did offer us the director of our first franchise we're going to talk about. We may talk about these films a little bit more in depth, but we'll focus more on the franchise and its sort of renaissance for the B movie. And you probably get where I'm going if I'm talking about The Asylum. I'm talking about the cultural phenomenon, which it's hard to argue that fact, Sharknado. And this is one of those film franchises that literally came out of nowhere, that when it was first pitched, it just came up with a really dumb idea, and then they developed the script around that, and it just became a new star vehicle for 90210 star Ian Ziering and Tara Reid, and just the litany of other cameos that happened in these movies, which each movie gets steadily more and more ridiculous over time, which I think really worked to the film series' benefit, especially after the fourth one. Like, my favorites of the Sharknado are 1, 5, and 6. 2's got some really great moments in it. But I think 5 and 6 I like because it just throws everything out the window and just embraces its stupidity. And that's what I love.
I thought I was going insane watching.
Yeah. I couldn't believe I had to type the phrase to you. And then Tara Reid flies and uses her laser eyes.
Well, you asked me, has she used her laser eyes or lightsaber yet? And I went, what?
It is so ridiculous.
And I had seen the first one when everybody did because of the big internet meme. It was Sharknado. Like, they had done the Mockbuster before. That's what they're known as. For anybody who doesn't know, a Mockbuster is where you take a currently popular, upcoming movie and make your own
side project sort of thing.
Rip off version is what the public used to call it that. But they take the Mockbuster and go in a different direction usually. They'll have a similar cover with a similar title and then have a completely different plot. Yeah,
because like they did a Sherlock Holmes mockbuster, they did Transmorphers.
Transmorphers is probably the highest profile ones that they've done, because they came out at a time when like grandma would go to the store and pick up, I got that Transformers movie for you, and you'd be like, that's not at all what I
yeah, that is not Optimus Prime.
Interestingly enough, I'll stand with this, they're better movies than most of the Bay films.
I think you could make a pretty strong case for Transmorphers 1 is better than Transformers 2 Revenge of the Fallen. Even though I went back through our digital archives and actually defended Revenge of the Fallen, which I thoroughly enjoy, but I'm a huge Transformers fan.
It was a terrible theatrical experience because the graphics weren't even done until they hit video.
Yeah,
but I'll tell you this, the fifth film, the one that was with them in King Arthur's court, has a more ridiculous plot than the Transmorphers movies do. Yeah, like at one point, Finn, who's played by Ian Ziering, travels through time because his son, Dolph Lundgren... Oh, I'm talking about... See, you still haven't seen Transformers 5. Oh, no, yeah. That is about King Arthur's court. Oh, I forgot about that. And then Quintessa turns him into Nemesis Prime and all this other stupid crap. The Earth is Unicron. Yikes. Yes, exactly. And Anthony Hopkins fights off Decepticons with a shotgun, an umbrella, and a bulldog. Because, as one does. Yes, and the only reason the dog was in the film is because they found a stray, and he liked it and wanted to keep it in real life. That's the only good thing that came out of that movie. All right. So that's just trying to give you a comparison of how far those movies fell, where at least the mockbusters from the Asylum actually stayed the course. Yeah, I mean that, and they fully embraced. Like they did this. Like the first one came out, and it was sort of the next big thing. Remember 2003, 2004, when everything was all about snakes on a plane. Yep. That was probably the first internet meme-driven movie to be created. Which I took advantage of that so hard. Let me tell you a really small story. So back in the day when this came out, Snakes on a Train had a website. Snakes on a Plane. And which you could use to have a soundboard call somebody. I was notorious in my hometown for using this, like virtually as like, if there were people that I knew or people that I could just harass with this thing, I used it endlessly. And they'd look at me, well, Sam Jackson just called me. Fuck you, Mike. Well, like there was that. And then of course you had all the sort of mockbustery type movies come out around that time. And that's when a lot of the sci-fi TV movies started getting big, and that's when the Asylum took off because they were around in the 90s. They just were not. They didn't hit their stride till the mockbuster, ridiculous monster movie thing became a big deal, where it was like once or twice a month there was something on the Sci-Fi Channel, and pretty much there was like at least one of their films every month for several years being produced for television. Yeah, which it's one of the last channels to still do the direct-to-TV movie. Mm-hmm. And now, of course, there's direct to streaming. But with them, the first hit in quotes they did was when, remember, it was what news site was it? Ain't It Cool News or something that broke the news about this Sharknado movie coming out. They tried to make an example of it. The first one, it was being made, and they tried to make an example of like, this is what's wrong with movies. Look at how ridiculous and stupid this is, and it backfired on whatever news site posted it because it became like this internet meme where it's like, oh my god, that sounds amazing. Yeah, and like they ended up having more people watch it than they ever expected. Yeah, like it received millions of viewers. It trended on Twitter for God knows how long. There was Funko Pops. There was an Archie comic book crossover. There has been other merchandise involved with it. There's books based on it. It's a franchise, and it was making the rounds on the late night talk show circuit for a while too. And these things came out on a fairly regular basis, like every year until the last one. Yeah, it was every year for all of them. And but you also look at in the first film, it was it had celebrities or cameo celebrities. That's one thing that they've become very known for with not just that franchise but the Asylum as a whole. Is when I say getting the D-list celebrities, like, or people that we used to be, a lot of people that were famous in the 80s that are no longer famous, or child actors. I can't tell how many films they've made with Tiffany and Debbie Gibson. It's like if you were a pop idol that is no longer famous, they'll put you in their movies. But in doing that, they end up pulling in together like a whole group of like roving actors that appear in all. They have like 10 different people that appear in most of their films, which is kind of cool. It's like a closed universe or something like that.
One of the things that I thoroughly enjoyed about this is having Ian Ziering, like I said, the guy who was, I can't remember his character's name from 90210, but he really embraced this role. And I said this to the producer, David Michael Latt, which I'm actually going to read you an interview that we conducted via email with him in just a moment. I'm like, you have your own Bruce Campbell. You have your own icon. That's pretty significant for a studio.
He does. It's kind of crazy.
So I am going to read the interview that I did with David Latt, who is, like I said, one of the co-founders of the Asylum. And my first question to him was, the Asylum has become one of the most successful independent studios. What do you attribute to your success? Drugs and alcohol. There's a saying in this town that you only fall upwards, and the Asylum is a clear example of that. I will say in all seriousness now, I think our success comes with loving the process, love making movies, hiring people that feel the same. You only get involved in projects we want to see and what entertains us. Oh, and we're whores. We never say no to anything. Another successful strategy is that we don't make movies for more than our allocated budget. It's tough, especially when the market share gets smaller and smaller, but it has to be done. We employed 20 plus people on the corporate side, and going over budget on any project can seriously affect their P&H, I'm not sure what that means, insurance and employment. So for those and our sanity, we lock down our budgets. Lastly, we are a studio for hire. We make the films that our buyers want, and because we target a specific movie for our buyer, we are successful. My second question is, carving out a niche as a studio that can do pretty much whatever they want with tie-ins and mockbusters, what has been the most fun project your studio has done? The most fun project we have done is probably whatever we're currently doing. Every show offers a unique opportunity to be successful and to screw up, and it's fun. The next question I asked, the Sharknado franchise was and is still a tremendous hit rush, resonating with pop culture. How did it feel to hit the mainstream like it did at the height of its popularity? At the height of Sharknado, we were invited to parties that we normally couldn't get into, which allowed us to meet people we normally wouldn't have met. It gave us the opportunity to produce Z Nation. Z was a great success for the network and for us. It also gave us an opportunity to embarrass my children, who would never admit that their friends that I produced Sharknado. How did the Archie versus Sharknado tie-in happen, and were you surprised given how family friendly the Archie brand typically is? Archie Comics happened because I was at Comic-Con in San Diego and met Dan Parent at his booth. I approached him because he was doing custom covers, and I wanted to make a gift to one of my partners of Archie versus Sharknado. Well, it turns out Dan was a huge fan of the show, and we both thought this would make a great crossover. Dan was going to talk to his publisher. Literally the same day, I get a phone call saying the publisher loves the idea, so let's talk details. The amazing part is that they allowed Anthony Ferrante, who is the director, to contribute to the storyline. Also, Dan drew people we love inside the comic, so my children have faces in the comic book, which I also find so amazing. Which Sharknado movie was the most fun to work on, and which was the cast was the most memorable to get together in terms of cameos and guest stars? The most amazing Sharknado would probably be number 2, simply because it showed us what a movie with proper funding and a little more time could be in the Asylum model. Prior to that, we had made movies with budgetary constraints and limited resources, but when the first Sharknado hit sci-fi, opened up their doors and wallets and said, go make the movie you need to make. It was a very inspiring experience. Plus, I got to go to New York and see a lot of friends, hang out with Judd Hirsch in Naked Cowboy. How cool is that? 6. Ian Ziering has cemented his character, Finn Shepard, as a new B-movie hero, what has that been like for your company to have its own iconic hero now? I'm in wonderment of it all. First, we have a genre named after us, the mockbuster, and now we have this amazing franchise. It's an embarrassment of riches. Is there any direction you would have liked to have taken the Sharknado franchise but didn't get a chance to explore? The beauty of Sharknado is that it can go to anywhere and everywhere. We have slot machines, an amusement park ride in Malaysia, trading cards. Currently, we're in discussions to do a musical in Vegas, an animated series, theme bars, you name it. It's very exciting. What will the Asylum's plans be once COVID restrictions are lifted? We're going to take a much-needed vacation and probably stay at home for 8 months. What has been your most memorable day, either on set or behind the scenes? The good news for me is that with most of the onset of early dementia, every day is the most memorable day and the most forgettable. I'm definitely a guy that looks forward, not backwards, but primarily because I can't remember anything. And my final question to him: what do you want the legacy of the asylum to be if things were to end tomorrow? That we made our shows in earnest, that we made that made the shows we wanted to make, that we hired the people we wanted to hire, that we had fun, that we stood our ground, that we delivered what we promised. Then we gave the opportunity to inspiring filmmakers, that we showed you don't need connections to be successful, that you can make a film just as entertaining for $100,000 that you can make for $100 million. And hopefully the audience had fun in the process. And that was the interview that I conducted with David Latt from the Asylum.
Which he definitely has a decent sense of humor.
Yeah, like that's something that I really appreciated about him and the Sharknado franchise. Watching them, especially watching Ian Ziering, this could have just been another payday. This could have just been another job.
If you look at the first film, before they knew what kind of a hit this was going to be, everybody tries to play it very serious. And that's probably why it's the highest reviewed of all of them, because it is fitting into that classic, we tried to make a good movie, but it ended up being terrible kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then so on and so forth, it gets sort of less positive reviews with each film in the franchise. But then in the latter half, movies 5 and 6, when they go completely off the rails, the reviews go up again.
Yeah, I mean, like some of the critical reviews are like, this is a 27% on Rotten Tomatoes. No, but if you look at what they're trying to accomplish, it's literally like in fact, it's like you are given the chance to write fan fiction, but you can pull from any weirdness you want to, write whatever you want and create whatever you want on the screen. And that's magical.
And I mean, the first story is pretty straightforward. There's a ship, basically a storm hits, a bunch of sharks pulled up into it, and then they were spread out after a tsunami hits, and they start attacking people.
Yeah, and then
pretty simple stuff, which it was, I believe, based on stories that happen in real life where fish get flown into cyclones, and you'll see it occasionally where it's like, it was raining fish today in such and such town. Well, the entire premise of that movie is, what would happen if it was sharks instead?
Yeah. And
very simple premise.
And then then
by the end, it's to give you an idea, the plots we won't read on here because they're too long. The plot sections of these movies are 5 times the length of any regular Hollywood movie because so much happens in the 90 minutes.
Yeah, like they cram a lot of stuff in there, and they cram a lot of different ideas. Like we mentioned, there's time travel at one point, dimension hopping.
Not to mention, in the last film, when there's time travel, his son is played by several different actors because they can only get certain people for certain scenes. So it doesn't explain why they look different when they time travel.
Actually, they do, because
they explain it with the one
timelines.
Yes, they explain it with the one character.
Yeah, they're like, if you didn't die or if this didn't happen, now the character's suddenly black, which I thought was actually kind of brilliant.
Well, I mean, like Dolph Lundgren plays his son in the previous film, and then when he shows up again, it's a different actor, like 4 or 5 times. I think at one point it's the Shermanator from the American Pie movies.
One of the things I did like in terms of what they did with the storytelling for Sharknado is one of the things they mentioned is when you go back in time, you can go forward all you want, but you can only ever go back once. So that explains.
That's kind of neat. Yeah. I mean, it's a nice way to do it. I will say this: Tara Reid is one of the co-producers of the films. Later on, I guess, putting up some of her own money or something into it. I have no idea how, but like you can see the stages of her health throughout the movies. It's like you can see where it dips, and then in the last one, she looks better again.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Like she gives. In certain
terrible performances.
I'd say
she's the worst actress out of all of them.
I'd say in certain ones she gets better. Like I think she's good in the second one. She's she's kind of terrible when she plays evil April in the 6th one and leads the robot
4, 5, and 6.
Army.
She's like, oh no, wow, this is the emotion I'm allowed to give in this film because if I scream anymore, I might pass out.
My favorite is when she has, I'll use my laser eyes, Finn. It's just the delivery of that line that That kills me.
Yeah, well, it's because it's so monotone. It's like she's reading the line for the first time, and they're like, "Yeah, no second takes, just do it."
And yet, there's another scene where just before she breaks out her lightsaber in one of these ones,
I don't remember. It's either the third or fourth one. I think she gets rebuilt in the fourth one or something.
Because Gary Busey's her father, which that's another thing I love. There are two cameos that I love because they play fairly significant roles. Gary Busey plays her dad, who rebuilds her as a cyborg
because he was on the moon.
And that was David Hasselhoff. Oh yeah, David Hasselhoff is Finn's dad.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, yeah, sorry, he's on the moon.
Who gets rescued by this Elon Musk stand-in, played wonderfully by Mad TV alum. I think it's Mad TV or In Living Color. It's one or the other. Tommy Davidson. I love that character. Color. He was such a good part of this. And then they had Lloyd Kaufman show up as a soldier. They had Tim Russ from Star Trek Voyager shows up as like a soldier. They had Frankie Muniz shows up.
In the last two films, out of all the bazillion cameos they had, by far the one that took it the most serious and had the best acting and clearly was into it was Dee Snider of Twisted Sister as the sheriff.
Yes, he was awesome.
He actually gave a legitimate good performance.
Mm-hmm.
Where and all throughout the almost everybody has terrible lines, terribly acted, very stilted. Ian Ziering is the only one that takes he is as serious in the first film as he is in the last film.
Yeah,
he's playing. It works because he's not ridiculous, so he plays the straight man through the entire thing, and everything else happening around him is ridiculous, and it almost gives it this eerie, weird feeling where it's like it's like everybody knows it's a bad movie, so they're not trying. But in your mind, you're like, wait, he thinks this is a good movie.
Yeah,
so he keeps doing it.
See, I consider Ian Ziering to be the modern Bruce Campbell. I really do.
Because of the chainsaws?
Well,
But Bruce Campbell was tongue-in-cheek, though. Nothing he does here. He is the pure straight man. Like he was like, I don't get starring roles in movies, and I don't get eyes on the roles I'm in. So I'm going to do this. This is like this is his Citizen Kane. He's going to do the absolute best he possibly can, and he'll be remembered for it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is going to cement. I mean, his two most memorable things he's ever going to do, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, is 90210, which was his early career,
where he played Steven something, I think.
Yeah, that's it, Steven, and then he plays Finn Shepard, and it works, and everybody around him in those scenes that he's in is brought up a level,
and he looks great. Like, I mean, there's some previous cast members from that show that showed up in here, and they don't time has not been kind to them, and he looks great, and he's actually a better actor now than he was back then.
Yeah, like, I'm really happy that the Asylum's casting found him to do this, and there is crossovers with other Asylum movies.
Yeah, we haven't seen them, but we probably will. The Lava Lantula and Two Lava Two Lantula.
Yeah, which stars Steve Guttenberg.
Which we kind of have to watch.
Oh, we gotta see it.
I mean, they clearly Too Fast, Too Furious, Two Lava, Two Lantula. They really embrace the ridiculousness, and again, we can't really go into the plots of in this podcast. We'll generally go into plot points we liked or not. This one's too hard.
Yeah, because
there's too many things.
They're so rich.
It's 6 movies, and in the 6 movies, you get the plot that you would normally see in like 25 movies.
Yeah,
it's like watching Power Rangers a whole season at 1.5 speed, and that's what it is.
Well, it's weird. The Asylum essentially does have its own MCU because Lava Lantula is connected to Sharknado. They could expand it out to other franchises if they wanted to.
Oh yeah, because some of the stuff that they've done would fit well with it. They've got a few other series that have come out with. They did the Mega Shark movies too, so they could have done a crossover there.
3-headed Sharktopus or something.
Yeah, yeah. Whatever those, they've made so many of them. Like they've even made like superhero knockoff movies like Almighty Thor. So they could mix things around. This is by far their greatest achievement. Like, how many movies that aren't like late 80s, early 90s horror films get 6 movies?
Yeah, and they're clearly still profitable. Now, as of this recording, the franchise is reportedly over, but if an idea came back, it wouldn't surprise me if David Latt and Anthony Ferrante, I think that's how you say his last name, just said, hey, I got an idea. Ian, what do you think? And just have him come back. I would love to see that happen.
And they could even do an animated thing, like think like Axe Cop or any of those, like if the Sci-Fi Network or if Adult Swim wanted a cartoon, they could totally do it in the Sharknado universe, or make it like the wacky world of the asylum, and just have it based on all their movies. Yeah,
because in the interview there, he was mentioning they've already got the theme park, the Vegas stage show, and animated series in the works.
And he said that they said they opened it up into having the TV show get made.
Yeah,
like with Z Nation, like, which, like for a long time before this series came out, when somebody saw the name Asylum on a DVD or Blu-ray, or they were like, oh, it's going to be a crappy TV movie. And then after the series came out, whenever you saw a new one, you're like, oh, it's going to be an Asylum movie. You knew what to expect. There's a certain level where, like, they're like the king of the B movies in the modern era.
Yeah, and that's not a bad thing, and that's why
it's great.
And that's why with this podcast we want to celebrate these things, because everybody's made the terrible Sharknado jokes, and everybody's made, oh, this movie is terrible, blah 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 blah. Charo's a wizard, or whatever.
No, Charo's the Queen of England.
Oh right, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Fabio is the Pope. So now they've actually gone and signed a deal with Amazon Prime. So if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, at least in Canada and the States, I'm not sure about other countries, but if you're in North America, the entire film series is available to watch if you're a Prime member right on their service.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up watching the last three. There is an issue if you're watching it that way, watching the sixth film. If you're watching with headphones on, or even like a TV with surround sound, all the movies are in surround sound, but for whatever reason, they misaligned, and the voice channel is in like the back right corner, and everything else is on the left hand side. So there's a problem with the mastering on that. I even reported it to Amazon, being like, hey, you got the wrong audio master. But if you're watching it, these are cheap enough you can find on DVD as well, or if you don't mind just having it on your TV, pressing like a stereo button to split it or something. But it is the one thing that was like, oh man, everything else is great except for that last film's audio.
Yeah, I mean, as we begin to kind of wrap this up, because the idea is to have these in bite-sized chunks.
Yeah,
I think they're worth watching. Don't marathon them. Do not marathon them.
No, or you end up like me going, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
If you're going to watch it, make sure you watch the first one, and you have to watch the first one.
And 5 and 6 are connected.
Yeah, 5 and 6 are connected directly. The other ones, like, they'll flow together a little bit, and certain characters appear here and there, but you can, if you really are like, I don't want to watch all of them, watch the first one, the 5th, and the 6th, because they connect characters to 2, 3, and 4 as well, but they actually show flashbacks of them, so you don't have to have watched all of them if you don't want to. To get the complete story, though, 1, 5, and 6.
Yeah, so hopefully you've enjoyed this inaugural episode of Loose Cannon, only on ThisWeekInGeek.net. We are going to open this up to some of our friends in the podcasting world. We'll probably have Andrew Roebuck on here at some point, as I know he loves himself a good B movie. Once again, big thanks to the Asylum for helping us with the interview in there, and that's with David Latt. You can find him on Twitter. You can go to the Asylum's webpage if you want to check out more of their stuff. Amazon Prime has a number of their movies, and Walmart bargain bins everywhere.
Yes.
So go check out this movie. The first one is fantastic. You'll have a fun time with it. Don't take it too seriously. And the secondary market for the Sharknado Funko Pops, I know they're not easy to find. So anyway, until next time, for Loose Cannon, we have been
Alex, the producer.
I've been Mike, the Birdman Dodd, saying be excellent to each other. We'll catch you guys again next time, right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
Well, that's our show. All right, here's the deal. Every time you watch my show, I will send you $40.
Checks will not be honored.
You've been listening to This Week in Geek, your source for guaranteed nonsense or your money back. Tune in next week for more info on the most important things you didn't need to know. Check out our website at ThisWeekInGeek.net and subscribe to our podcast through iTunes or any podcatcher. If you'd like to comment on this episode, head over to this episode's post at ThisWeekInGeek.net and leave a comment through Facebook Connect. Follow us on Twitter at ThisWeekInGeek.net and follow our Instagram at twig_official_podcast. Social media not your thing? Send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. We'll see you next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
Just when you think this show is terrible, something wonderful happens.
What?
It ends.
I have to go. Somewhere there is a crime happening.